Hey, how is everyone doing? It is so good to be here today for the Black Blockchain Summit. I have participated the last several years since the inaugural event, and this event and today is going to be probably one of my favorite things I've done. I always love being in person and seeing everyone. But today we have one of my blockchain heroes, and I can't even say blockchain, Bitcoin heroes, in the room, man, for a fireside chat. Mr. Andreas Antonopoulos, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you, Lamar?
I am doing amazing, man. It's been a while since I've seen you. I tell people you're the Bitcoin John the Baptist. You're the Bitcoin Jeremiah. You know what I'm saying? One guy took Bitcoin Jesus, so he can't do that no more. But you know.
No, I prefer the Bitcoin Walmart greeter. It's got fewer religious overtones, and also it's kind of like nondescript. Like, I'm the guy at the front door going, "Hello, folks. Welcome to Bitcoin. Can I interest you in some holding your own keys on aisle 1?"
Man, I cannot. Okay. See, you've already done it, because this is exactly why I wanted to get on with you and talk with you. Because I remember when I started in Bitcoin, it was really about freedom. Like, literally, I got into Bitcoin because I read the white paper, and the only thing I saw, I didn't see money, I didn't see being able to get a lot more fiat value, I saw freedom. So before we even go into that, right, let's talk about you, Andreas. How did you even find out about Bitcoin? Like, where did it come from for you?
So I remember clearly around the middle of 2012, reading an article, and I think it was on a geek website called Slashdot. It's a geek news website. News for nerds, stuff that matters is what it's called. And they had an article about Bitcoin, and it had a link to the white paper. And I think I had heard of Bitcoin once or twice before, but I'd only heard of it in the context of gambling sites, which were the kind of users in those days. People were using it for various gambling sites. You know, the US had prohibited gambling onshore, so a lot of people were doing that. And I had dismissed it. The first couple of times I heard it in relation to gambling, not that interested. When I read the white paper, though, because of my background in computer science, my interest in the whole cypherpunk movement, cryptography for social change, and all of the things I'd been doing since my teen years, when I read that Bitcoin white paper, it just pressed all of the buttons, and it completely derailed my career. It derailed my life. It derailed everything. It just completely changed my trajectory. And I had a moment. I had a moment that I've had before with technology where I just get completely obsessed and lost in a technology. And Bitcoin did that for me. And the rest is history.
Yeah, it tends to be a drug in that way, man. Like, if you're a person that is into code and economics, which same as me, like, I literally took the hit, and I've been down that rabbit hole for a while, man. So here's the thing. So you got interested into it, and I've had talks with you in the past, and I know you're all about freedom, and I know you're about justice, really. Like, me and you have talked about justice before. So let's fast forward a little bit from there until when I met you at the Texas Bitcoin conference, right? And I remember back then, that conference was kind of like the epitome of what Bitcoin was at the time. The type of people that were at the conference, it was a very eclectic, very diverse group of individuals. Man, talk about those early days of Bitcoin and the types of people that were kind of drawn to Bitcoin at that time, man.
Well, I think the main thing was that at the time, very few people had heard of it. And it wasn't really, nobody really strongly believed that it was a money-making opportunity yet. And so as a result, it still had a certain naive purity to it, because people were not looking at this technology as a get-rich-quick scheme. And then, you know, it's like the days of the first Tesla sedan. You know, nobody was betting on Elon Musk for their portfolio then. You were one of the weirdos who had one of the weird cars.
Right.
It wasn't a status symbol. And, you know, quite honestly, the community then was made of a bunch of weirdos who were ideologically inclined to this, either because of an interest in technology, an interest in different types of economics or politics. And it was a very ideological movement. And then after we saw a couple of very strong bull runs and bankers started getting interested in it and people started chasing the moonshot, then like any other thing that goes mainstream, it got diluted. The values got diluted. And a lot of people nowadays, they come because of the allure of a get-rich-quick scheme. And hopefully, we teach them enough to shift their perspective and understand why this is important for the world, what it means to bank the unbanked, to extend opportunity to billions of people who don't have it, and persuade them to stay for another reason.
Right. Yeah. And the thing is that, and for everyone out there who doesn't know what Bitcoin is, you're at the Black Blockchain Summit. So I've already thought that you've done some study on something blockchain related. So I'm not going to go into that with Andreas because there are probably 4.5 million videos of Andreas talking about what Bitcoin is. But I just wanted to get his perspective. And also, I was part of that weirdo group, so I really understand what it was, man. Like, I remember going into a bookstore down in Austin, and it was probably the epitome of Bitcoin at the time. It was like people with AKs on in a bookstore watching the video, right, about Bitcoin. And I always thought, like, this is, like, look around, it's like, this is my tribe, you know what I mean? And then I remember when it kind of changed. It went from the Texas Bitcoin Conference, and very quickly it went to Coin Summit. Do you remember Coin Summit?
Yep.
Coin Summit, I couldn't even get in. I didn't have enough money to get in Coin Summit, so I sat out in the line. So what do you think happened? Where did that shift come where the people went from having AKs on and vests and sandals to basically blue and gray suits? Because I remember Coin Summit was just such a different thing, and I kind of felt like everything I read in the white paper was kind of getting shifted a little bit, right? It was like, now all of a sudden people are in it for a different reason than the freedom, than the Porcupine Fest. So when do you think that shift happened, and how do you feel about that shift? Like, honestly, like, how do you feel about that shift?
Well, to tell you the truth, I was never into the whole, you know, guns, red meat, and waving the flag contingent. That wasn't my tribe either. I was much more interested in kind of the elegance of the technology, and it had some important aspects to it. You know, today they call that social justice warrior, which, you know, I was unapologetically interested in social justice and creating fair structures. So not quite meshing with that crowd, right? So, you know, there's contingents to these political perspectives. There were a lot of right libertarians, and you know, I was more on the civil libertarian side of that equation. But regardless, you know, whether it was exactly the right tribe or not, I can tell you I certainly wasn't on the let's make some bankers even more rich than they already are contingent, which is the one that came about a year later. And I remember going to a conference where I was invited at the very last minute. They put me, and this was a conference in Vegas, and they put me on a panel, the last panel on the last day. And I show up, and the panel has investors, VCs, bankers, and me. And it was 4 suits and me on the end of the table in a leather jacket. You know, I could have put up my feet up on the table just to make a point. And they started on the other end, and they started talking about how do we bring legitimacy to Bitcoin for institutional investors. And it got to me, and I was like, I reject the very concept that you, of all people, are going to bring legitimacy to Bitcoin. You who raided the Treasury, you who set up Ponzi schemes, you who have been defrauding investors for decades, you who work in a system that is corrupt from top to bottom, have the audacity to come and talk about legitimacy. We didn't ask for your approval, we don't need your permission, and we reject the very basis that you can bring legitimacy to a mathematical system of truth. And I almost did a mic drop at that point, but literally, and a small contingent in the back of the room just erupted, right? And the moderator didn't know what to do with me. They didn't know how to proceed from there because I just, kind of dropped a bomb in the middle of the whole conversation.
Right. And I think the thing is that like those types of events kept coming.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. But it's funny because you can shift the conversation even like that. I mean, 3 questions in, people at the end of the table were going, well, we're not talking about legitimacy and doing bunny ears around it. So they no longer had kind of the audacity to continue along that line.
Right.
And they had to tone it down a bit. By the end of that panel, they left with literally their tails between their legs. And I realized at that point that we were in for a fight for kind of the soul of this system. Because before long, you're going to have demands for adding banking regulations, saying yes to the regulators, becoming respectable and legitimate, and doing KYC and AML and all of these other things, and basically turning Bitcoin into PayPal. That's basically the battle. The battle was to turn, PayPal started it as an ideological system until it got completely defanged. And that's what happens to innovative systems. So I knew right there we were in for a battle. And that's a battle that's still being fought today. Today it's being fought on whether we will have an ETF in order to bring institutional investors. So once they give the approval, we can all get our moonshot. It has nothing to do with what we're doing here.
No. And one thing I always say is Bitcoin already works. Like, I've been in the game for a while. You've been in the game for a while. It works. I can send value from me to you, and I don't know where you are in an undisclosed location. Most people know where I am. I talk about it every time. But I can send value from me to you in the same way that we were able to do back in the day. And so Bitcoin works. Bitcoin is Bitcoin. Of course, there are always going to be improvements. But here's my question. So one of the things that I like to talk about, as you know, I created the Fever wallet, and shout out to you, man. You did a really dope thing in the Chicago Bitcoin conference by telling people to grab it. And it was like people started, now that you gave it again, because me being a
great
black
wallet.
Yeah, me being a black dude, right? It's like sometimes people look for a person who's not black to give validation. Like real talk, you know what I'm saying? Because I couldn't even get on the bitcoin.org site as a wallet at that time. And yet here you were in Chicago telling people, hey, great wallet for iOS, the only one you can get this wallet, right? And then that's when people were like, oh, Andreas said it, so I guess it's okay. And I still couldn't get on Bitcoin. I still have never gotten my wallet on bitcoin.org, even though at the time it was the only place. So that validation thing, speak to the validation of Wall Street, right? And why Wall Street is so ingrained in us it's almost from a Wall Street, the US dollar is ingrained in us from a psychological level. Talk about that and why it's so difficult to tell people about Bitcoin because they're so indoctrinated. Like, talk about that a little bit, man.
All right, let me give you a parallel, which is one of my favorite movies of all time, Monty Python's The Life of Brian. And it's the story of the Messiah, right? And the Messiah is trying to tell them to think for themselves. And he stands on a high balcony and he's telling his hundreds of followers, okay, I need you to stop following me. We'll stop following you. I need you to think for yourselves. We'll think for ourselves. What should we think? And no matter how hard the Messiah tries, the followers just keep repeating everything the Messiah says and completely miss the whole point, right?
Yep.
And what this speaks to is the fact that as a species, we want leadership We want authority. We want someone else to make the difficult decision so that we don't have to make it, so that we don't have to take a risk, right? And that's a convenient adaptation for a social species, but it's also dangerous, right? Because what that does is it gives enormous power to the people who can sweet talk a crowd the most. And it's a very dangerous kind of tendency. And yet you see it, you know, for years we've been talking about this and going, hey, people, this is a leaderless movement. You need to think for yourself. Don't take what I'm saying. Here's some resources so you can do some research. Here's a bunch of choices. I'm not endorsing a single thing. And I've been very, very careful not to endorse companies, not to endorse projects, because what happens is that people take that endorsement as a substitute for their own
research,
decision-making, research, critical thinking, etc. And that can backfire really, really badly. You know, one day you're on a pedestal and everybody respects you, then you make a mistake because we're humans, right? We make mistakes. And then everybody's like, ah, see, I got burned because Andreas endorsed this project. So I've been very, very careful not to do that. When I talk about projects, I talk about projects that I find interesting and always ones that I have absolutely no financial incentive or even perceived conflict of interest. And only because I'm interested in the technology or I'm interested in the project. So when I talked about FIFA Wallet, it was because, you know, it was a really easy to use wallet that I had used repeatedly to give people demonstrations. You know, these are the days when I would go to a conference and I would give out 10, 15, 20 Bitcoin.
Me too.
To complete strangers.
Right.
In little bits, like, here, half a Bitcoin, here, try it out. Let's set you up with a wallet. I'll give you half a Bitcoin so you can get started. And, you know, it was a matter of, okay, what wallet can I use that works on iOS? And there were no wallets on iOS at the time. So half the people who came to me with iPhones, I couldn't help. What wallet works on iOS, easy to use, non-custodial? And it was FIFA. Really, there was only one choice. So anyhow, I wasn't trying to do anything with that endorsement. I was trying to solve a problem. And the problem was how to introduce people.
You're trying to give people Bitcoin. And the crazy thing is that now I feel like we're in this weird space where we've accepted the validation. And what I mean by that is, I remember the tagline of not your keys, not your Bitcoin, right? That was what everybody was talking about all the time. Oh, I couldn't even see it. Yes,
not your keys, not your coins. I have it in mugs now. It's probably the most successful 6 words I've ever said in my life.
That's the truth. And I think we've all sold out to the Cash Apps, the Robin Hoods, because, and it's not necessarily selling out, it's just that as people got adopted, I mean, as people begin to adopt it, those are the places they can get them quicker. Because it used to be you have to come to a Bitcoin conference and meet somebody like Andreas or Lamar who would get you a wallet and then send you some coins, right? It used to be that way. Now people are using links and going to these websites and they're able to get cryptocurrency really fast. But and I want to talk about this.
Don't you worry. Don't you worry one bit, my friend. Those days are going to end, and they're going to end abruptly and with a very, very big bang. You think they're going to let this continue? The reason that the Cash Apps and the Robin Hoods and all of these companies can play with Bitcoin now is because it's not important. It's not systemically threatening to the financial services industry. And because the vast majority of people don't need it in Western developed countries and therefore are not really that big of a threat. But you know, we're heading into an economic system that increasingly makes this necessary. When you turn a country into a third world country overnight, then you expect the next thing that happens is third world economics. And in third world economics, Bitcoin is useful. So it's getting useful for Americans, not because Bitcoin got better, but because the US dollar is rapidly heading in the wrong direction. So here's the thing. When it gets useful, you think you're going to be able to go on an app and get it? Absolutely not. They're going to shut down every single on-ramp. And as they do so, they're going to demand more and more hoops and more and more barriers. KYC AML is nothing, just wait. It's going to get much, much more difficult. And then, of course, what that means is that Bitcoin is going to trend more stealthy, more coin joins, more stealthy addresses, more non-reuse of addresses, more even confidential transactions maybe. And the other privacy coins are also going to grow. And so we're looking at a system that's going to diverge. You will not have legitimate organizations using Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is going to be illegitimate, because legitimacy is only bought by complying with a broken system. And Bitcoin can comply.
Say that one more time. Legitimacy is, say it one more time.
Legitimacy is bought by complying. Yes. Right. So eventually, people are going to have to choose. They're going to have to choose between a Bitcoin that works and actually solves a problem, or a Bitcoin that's legitimate and owned by the banks, but doesn't actually solve any problems, because if it did, it would be illegal. It's as simple as that.
So here's my theory. Here's my theory, right? Because I keep seeing this. Don't you think that the government has realized that Bitcoin is far more trackable if given KYC, AML on every address, it's far more trackable than cash? So they almost might opt us into it just to watch us even more, to survey us. That's my idea, because the more and more you have to, the on and off ramps are way different than they used to be. I remember going to Starbucks and getting my Bitcoin from some dude that had a hoodie on sometimes, you know what I mean? And I would go and sell and give Bitcoin that same way, right? Back in the day. Now,
I don't think that's going to last though. I mean, I really don't think that's going to last. No, I don't, because push is going to come to shove. There's no way, because of course, that kind of Bitcoin can never be legitimate enough. Okay, so you do KYC and AML, but then there's this pesky 21 million upper limit that means they can't inflate it to shit. So how are they going to deal with that? They're going to demand changes to the protocol. And when they demand changes to the protocol, they're going to end up forking it into JP Morgan Chase coin. And at that point, those things will exist. You are going to get weak copies of Bitcoin that are pretending to be the real thing, but that have none of the revolutionary, innovative, disruptive capabilities. But there will still be a coin that does, or several coins. In fact, now it's a whole ecosystem of coins that still have the revolutionary capabilities. I have a slogan I use for this, which is, you got to think of this as our current economy is a plane, it's on fire, and I've got a parachute. So the main thing I'm caring about right now is, does the ripcord work? Bitcoin is a ripcord blockchain. What do I mean by ripcord? Ripcord, revolutionary, immutable, public, collaborative, open, resistant, and decentralized. That's what a ripcord is. And you'd better have one on your parachute, because if your blockchain isn't revolutionary, immutable, public, collaborative, open, resistant, and decentralized, then what it is a bank coin or a Fed coin or a Facebook coin. And then it's just a mechanism for surveillance.
Right.
And it's pointless. There's no point in doing that. We already have that. The US dollar, just in digital format. We don't need that. The world doesn't need more of that, although a lot of people will buy it. So these things are going to come to a head. This is not going to be a simple, easy transition. The bankers are not going to go, oh, well, I guess we should just reset the system and transfer wealth in the way it's never happened before. And I criticize the people who sell this idea of hyper-Bitcoinization, or a kind of a voluntary transfer of power. Never happened in history, not going to happen now. We're in for a fight, and in that fight, they're going to first call us criminals for using this technology, and then they're going to say that it was Bitcoin that crashed the global economy because it offered an exit. So for the few people who do exit, it's going to get blamed. And I've done a whole talk about this particular thing, which ends to the tune of, we didn't start the fire. It was always burning since the world was turning. which I can't hum with a tune because then we'd get a copyright strike on this video, but you get the point.
No, I get it. I know. I really get it. And I think that what you just said is exactly why I am so, I don't know. I'm kind of kind of feeling weird about Bitcoin in its current state, because it feels like a lot of those of us who were early in the beginning have sold out to the fact that its value is based on this fiat currency that we said had no value in the first place.
But that's because you can, and that's really effectively it's a form of privilege of living in a Western developed country where your currency isn't completely useless, where you can still buy food, shelter, healthcare, and an exit ticket with your currency. When you can't, those kinds of illusions wash away very, very quickly. So to me,
right,
Bitcoin has always been important because it is the currency of last resort. It is the system that maintains its principles when it is a matter of life and death, when they're trying to actively shut things down, where they're trying to prevent you from exiting from the system, because if enough people exit from the system dies. And so that's when it becomes useful. Until then, it's a toy. And so, yeah, we're having some fun playing with this toy right now, but to many people around the world, it's not a toy. It was never a toy. You know, I work with people in Venezuela. I work with people in other countries who need this in order to buy medication, in order to buy food. They use Bitcoin as a way to protect their family from disaster, and in many cases, to help their family exit as refugees from these kinds of situations. To me, that's what's important. That's where this thing has a unique application that when push comes to shove, other systems won't do. If they can shut it down, if it requires permission, then when push comes to shove, they stop giving permission and they shut it down. So that's when Bitcoin shines. It's when they don't want it to anymore. And right now we're in the honeymoon period. It's a toy. It's making some people money. It's losing other people money. It goes up, it goes down. You know, that's all noise. It's not really meaningful. But the thing is, Bitcoin hasn't changed. Its fundamental properties haven't changed one bit.
The same.
It's exactly the same, and it does what it's supposed to do. Just because people can't see what it's supposed to do doesn't mean that it's not doing it. And so from that perspective, I'm still optimistic. And I'm also optimistic because beyond Bitcoin, the system, and blockchain technology as a theme, the basic ideas of decentralization, of robust money, of uncensorable systems, of peer-to-peer networking in the form of money and smart contracts and all kinds of other things have now spread beyond Bitcoin. There is now a massive ecosystem of developers who both understand why and can also execute the how to make these systems again and again and again. And if you take one down, another one pops up in its place and is more robust and solves the, you know, if you manage to find a bug in one of these systems and you crash it, then the system that pops up in its place has a fix for that one bug. And so once you create that kind of momentum of innovation, this thing is unstoppable. It's no longer a single technology or a single network. It's a movement. It's a technological movement that transforms how we govern ourselves, how we manage money, how we connect as a global society. And I think those are the interesting. So I don't lose hope. I think that there's more innovation, more excitement, more enthusiasm, more participation, more strength now than ever before in our entire industry.
I can agree with that. But at the same time, it's like we don't have enough people educating folks, right? And what I mean by that is that most of the people that are getting in right now, they're hearing about Bitcoin and it's becoming this speculative asset that they can maybe get rich from, and rich in fiat currency. And so
I'm not that worried about it, because nowadays the people who think they can get rich off this stuff are not even looking at Bitcoin.
yeah,
They're
right.
diving straight into they're driving straight into yield farming on yams and Yifi and Hex and 1,000
That is
other
true.
systems,
That
and
is
that's
true.
great. You can have them. You know,
That's true.
if anything, the people left who are still interested in Bitcoin are the curmudgeons. Uh, you know,
Yeah,
it's all of the get
it's the
off my
old guys
lawn
like
people.
myself. Because I really like, even for the Black Blockchain Conference Summit. I want the Black people that are watching this right now to understand this. That what we're talking about is, make sure you start understanding the old school, we call them old school, but old school principles of what we used to do back in the day. Make sure you understand how to create wallets, or how to own your own keys, and understand the importance of having your own keys. Understand that the decentralization is what gives it its power at the end of the day, right? Not having a single point of failure. Like those types of things. Because I was even looking at an article on one of these new DeFi systems that was supposed to be decentralized, and you come to find out it is like the most centralized thing you've ever seen, and there's $100 million worth of value locked up into this centralized thing, and it's like we're
No,
losing.
it's not the most central, but even those DeFi
Not the most
things.
centralized, but you know what I'm saying.
I'll
It's
tell
like
you,
very
the
centralized.
most centralized thing is run by a dude called Steve Mnuchin, and it's called the US dollar, and it's a Ponzi scheme of monumental
real.
proportions that at the drop of a hat can divert $6 or $7 trillion to the military industrial complex and the big banks and all of the big corporations. Boeing gets a bailout. You know, all of these like shitty failed companies, these dinosaurs get bailouts. And then after all that's happened in a weekend, everybody goes, but we can't do unemployment. We don't have any money left.
Right.
You know, that is a
Right.
centralized system. You can't do, even in the DeFi systems that you're describing, you can't do that. So, you know, I think we should maintain a sense of proportion and perspective here. Even the most centralized of the decentralized protocols are still somewhat decentralized.
Right.
And they're still somewhat robust, and they're still an improvement of what we have before. That doesn't mean they're all good. Many of them are complete garbage. But you know, what we're doing right now is exploring and experimenting in a completely new environment. And
that's the fun part about all of it, right? It's like we're experimenting. It's always an experiment. It always works. Here's my question. Because you've seen it, right? We've been along this journey. I think I got in probably a year after you, like from a timeline standpoint. And we've been along this journey. Shout out to Adam B. Levine, man, not the singer.
Yeah,
but we've
my
been
co-host on
journey.
Let's Talk Bitcoin, the original Let's Talk Bitcoin show.
The original Let's Talk Bitcoin, my man. And I appreciate him too. But we've been on this journey for a while, and I've just seen it move, but I'm always holding. So people ask me all the time. I'm just like you from the standpoint of I don't recommend or I don't disparage anybody from getting into anything. I just literally just shoot the facts. Here's the technology. This is what it is. You make your own decision. But I've held over the time, right? And I've held on to the coin, and I still have. I guess I just want this freedom so bad. You know what I mean? Like I want people to understand, especially because this is the Black Blockchain Summit. So we have to talk about that, right? From a justice standpoint. Right. We got to talk about the fact that Bitcoin actually allows people who are economically oppressed in this country to actually hold on to something that no one else controls and no one can take from you if you understand how to control your keys. No one can take it from you. They can't keep you from sending the value. Those types of principles are things that I think I am holding on for, right? Like that's what I'm here for. Can you talk about let's just talk about a little about the social justice. And I'm gonna let y'all know, one of the things Andreas told me a long time ago, and I don't even know if he remembers this, but he was telling me about the neighborhood he lived in and he kept cameras in his car just for the police. And I don't know if you remember telling me that, man. I always remember that because I'm like, that is a cold-blooded thing, right? Like put the cameras in your car because if they want to trip, you got them, right?
But that's because they fucked with me repeatedly. Right. And the reason was I lived in a neighborhood, Flatbush Avenue, 71st Precinct, NYPD. You know, the most thuggish gang in New York.
The
And
police.
on a daily basis, I would watch them brutalize people. And because I lived in that neighborhood, they tried to brutalize me too. And here's the bottom line.
Right.
You know, we talk about empowerment, we talk about social justice. When we're talking about these technologies, that's one aspect of it, is using technology to give yourself superpowers, right? So various technologies over time have given individuals superpowers, whether it's the printing press or a laptop that allows you to be a TV station like we're doing now, or be a blogger so you can compete with the news media, or be a journalist by using your smartphone to record the truth of what's happening on the street. All of these things are technologies that give individuals superpowers. And when you decentralize technology like that, you give so many people superpowers that they can even fight against highly centralized, very powerful adversaries like an organized state that is trying to remove their freedoms. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is the economic one. You know, we talked about the on-ramps and whether they're going to close them down, or whether you can do Robinhood or Cash App or stuff like that. Here's the thing that what most people forget and ignore about what Bitcoin is and how you should look at it. People ask me all the time, should I buy Bitcoin now? How should I buy Bitcoin? And my answer has always been the same for the past 7 years. Don't buy it, earn it. Earn it. Why? Because the largest peer-to-peer decentralized exchange for fiat to crypto is the labor market. Always has been. It's been the largest decentralized exchange of value in the world, is people paying people for products and services and their labor. The labor market is the way, it's completely uncensorable, it's completely peer-to-peer, it's anonymous, it allows you to go in your local community and exchange value directly without intermediates, without corporations taking a cut, without the banks taking a cut, without anybody being able to stop you, without needing a license to exercise your profession and all of that. So one thing is earn it. But here's the other thing. When you switch to earning instead of buying, and you're no longer working for dollars, taking those dollars, converting them into crypto and saving your crypto, you fundamentally change the relationship between yourself and money. And the reason you do that is because not only are you fully entering the economy and turning it into a circular economy where you get paid in cryptocurrency for your labor and services, and then you pay others in cryptocurrency for their labor, products, and services. So there are no on-ramps and off-ramps. It's a closed economy. It's a circular economy. And to me, that's always been the ultimate goal. But here's the other thing. When you go into that economy, it's a very important statement of principles, and it's a very powerful move, because what you're also doing is you're exiting. You are withdrawing from the system that is taking a cut out of every day, every hour you work. The most appalling thing that I see, and I saw it at my time in Brooklyn, was that you had a community, a local community, that was being policed by suburban cops that were coming in from Staten Island, right, and policing a neighborhood that wasn't theirs, and with extreme brutality, extreme corruption, and murderous intent all the time. And the worst thing about that was that they were being paid out of the sweat and labor of the people in that community that they were brutalizing. So the end result is that not only do you end up getting brutalized by the state, and this is not just this is a global phenomenon. This happens everywhere. This is a constant power struggle between centralized organizations and states against the communities they supposedly serve. Not only were people in that neighborhood being brutalized, but they were paying for the privilege. That was coming out of their payroll taxes. State and local taxes in places like that are regressive. They're a part of your paycheck no matter what income you're making, and it's taken out of your paycheck before you even get paid. So if you're getting paid in that way, if you're getting paid through that mechanism, you're paying for the cop who commutes into your neighborhood in order to brutalize you. That to me is unacceptable. So the power move is not only to earn crypto, but to withdraw your participation, your creative potential, your labor, from a system that uses all of those things against you. Now, obviously, that doesn't apply to me. I mean, even in that neighborhood, yeah, I got harassed by cops. I got manhandled a couple of times because I refused to play along with their stupid games. I asserted my rights, but that was nothing compared to the daily indignities that were happening just outside my window. And so, you know, this is about spreading that message in my mind. And the problem is that we talk about empowering the unbanked, the underbanked, and those who are oppressed in places like Venezuela. Well, guess what? Brooklyn is, in many ways, a little Venezuela, right? There are pockets in every country where people live under the thumb of oppression. And so these lessons apply there too. It's not for the people across the river in Wall Street. It was never for them.
Well, look, here's the thing, Andreas. So let's talk about this really quick, because I just want to, one of the things that that interests me from the very beginning, I was trying to, myself and Leif, I don't know if you remember Leif, but we were trying to figure out how to give everyone in the hood a Bitcoin miner back in the day. Yeah. And we wanted to give them a miner and then allow them to utilize the free electricity that was subsidized by the government to run that miner, right? Right. But guess what happened? As we started on that path, ASICs came in, and it's a whole lot harder to get people with the ASICs, right? Get them to start mining because of the cost, the expense. So what the capital cost. Yeah. What do you think about it, about the fact that now the mining has gone into the hands of, and which we knew that was going to happen. And I'm going to ask you another question, because I always ask this to people who've been in the game for a while. What do you think about the mining going into the hands, because Bitcoin was built on a capital structure, like he who has the most can mine the most, right? What do you think about it going into the hands of those that have the most fiat money or fiat value in the first place? Like, what do you think about that? And do you think that is could that become a problem in the future? I have to ask that question because of course, absolutely. Everyone else asked that question that supports all of these other coins. So I want to ask you that and see what you think about that. So I hope I can answer this as directly as possible and not dodge the question at all. Yes. The bottom line is that you cannot change the Gini coefficient, the coefficient of inequality, income inequality and wealth inequality with cryptocurrency, at least as conceived today. The rich get richer is not a feature of money, it's a feature of society. And any society in which you have free flow of capital will accumulate in that way. We're not going to change that. Here's the difference. The difference is, if you accumulate capital, can you use that accumulation of capital to change the very rules of the game and tilt the playing field in your favor so that everybody else doesn't even have a chance? And I think that's the real thing, because we're not just talking about the ability to accumulate capital. We're talking about that in every other system, those who accumulate capital can turn around and then rig the game in their favor. And when they do that, then it's no longer an issue of income inequality. It's an issue of economic, political power inequality. And control. So we're not going to solve the fact that those who start off with more capital can accumulate more capital. Whether it's proof of work, where it becomes a capital expense in buying silicon and how close you are to silicon fabrication and how much capital you can deploy in order to build a $100 million warehouse full of ASIC miners. And then, of course, the answer to that is not proof of stake, because proof of stake does the exact same thing. In order to bootstrap a proof of stake system, you have to have a pre-mine. You have to have a pre-allocation of capital to people you trust to not break the system on the first day, right? Otherwise, the system isn't stable. So in order to protect the network, you're going to have some kind of pre-allocation. Proof of stake cannot bootstrap
from zero. Proof of work bootstraps from zero, but then becomes a manufacturing, industrial scale, capital intensive operation. And proof of stake becomes a capital intensive operation because you have to bootstrap it. Both of these create a system whereby the rich get richer. And that's because that's how society works. It has nothing to do with cryptocurrency. Now, the question is, once the rich get richer, or when the rich already have some advantage, can they then turn around and change the rules of the system? They can't. In Bitcoin, they certainly can't. How do I know? They tried. In 2017, they tried. Not only did the miners try to change the rules of consensus, but several very, very big companies, exchanges, merchant companies, et cetera, and several multi-millionaires, perhaps billionaires, also tried to change the rules against the will of consensus. They failed. Not only did they fail, some of them lost $500 million failing. That is the point. So even if you have a system that reflects society's natural tendency, the accumulation, the Pareto distribution, 20% of the people get 80% of the gains, et cetera, you can still make a system where you can't buy yourself a new set of rules and shut out any possibility of anyone else advancing. And at least in this system where we have very free, very open markets, there is an opportunity by applying critical thinking, by understanding and being able to see which technologies have merit versus which technologies do not, that you can actually get a leg up, if you like, and climb up a ladder of success, financial success, technological success, skills, whatever, with some element of meritocracy, because you can't have the rules change from under you. That to me means something. It's not perfect. We can't just magically change human nature, but it is a massive improvement over what we have otherwise. At least in this scenario, the people who buy ASICs, the people who do proof of stake, the people who run this technology have to take enormous risk. And if that risk doesn't play out, nobody's going to bail them out, you know, and that's not how the traditional financial system works. Traditional financial system works in such a way as to encourage monopoly operation, rent-seeking behavior, and parasitic exploitation. And eventually the game gets completely rigged so that what you see on the surface is completely fake. Now, I think we can do better than that.
Well, here's the question. So, two things. Number one, I always envision, and I think about this, and I've talked to a lot of people about it, just to throw it out there as an idea. What if, instead of building Bitcoin based on capitalist principles, what if Bitcoin was built on more of a socialist type of a principle, wherein as anyone that is actually participating in the network itself actually got a share of every block that came through, right? How do you think that would change the entire paradigm, right? So that all you have to do is be running a node. It would recognize that you're running a node, and that would allow you to then mint yourself at that moment that your share of the network. What do you think that?
I think the fundamental concept here is, I'm going to flip it on its head. Rather than thinking about how you change Bitcoin, think instead of each blockchain, each competing blockchain being a package that includes a set of rules, a monetary and economic system, and a community that is voluntarily participating. When you choose a blockchain, you choose for whatever proportion of your labor or capital that you put in, you choose to participate in this system of rules voluntarily, and that means you agree to all of the rules and terms and conditions, right? Now, you don't have to just choose one system, and most importantly, you don't have to move from the place you are. you can choose a different system while remaining exactly where you are, which breaks one of the main things that I think is broken about our current system, which is if you're born in X place, you inherit all of the rules of the place of birth and have no other choice. It's a monopoly system, right? If you're lucky enough and you can travel, if your passport allows you to travel, maybe you can go and try your luck in another system with another set of rules. They're probably going to take away your children and put them in cages to make sure that doesn't happen. But the bottom line is that the system comes with a geography. The beautiful thing about blockchains and this idea of creating a virtual economy is that you can enter voluntarily, you can participate with a known set of rules. If you don't like it, you can exit voluntarily, enter another system. You could enter more than one system simultaneously. You could diversify across several ones, and everyone comes with the other voluntary participants who are your economy, the people you can trade with, and a set of rules that don't change, even if very powerful people in the system want them to change. So the simple answer is, Bitcoin as it is has a certain point of view, an economic, political, monetary point of view. And those who participate in that have chosen it, they like it. It's not going to change. That's the beauty. It isn't going to change. If you don't like it, you don't change Bitcoin. What you do is you exit and enter another system.
Right.
And we can build other systems. We can build systems that have other monetary characteristics, other economic and political characteristics, and they can be voluntary in their participation. Now, to the point of using a system that resembles socialism or universal basic income or a Marxist mud harvesting autonomous collective from another Monty Python's favorite movie. So that we can get away from, you know, a system of government based on a watery tart pulling out a sword from a rock. The basic idea here is you could have a system like that. You have to solve one fundamental problem, and that fundamental problem in distributed systems we call Sybil resistance, S-Y-B-I-L. So the idea is this. If you wanted to have one node, one vote, how do you know that a node is run by one person and that one person can't run more nodes and pretend to have more participation in the system and therefore earn more of the rewards? If there's a universal basic income in this system or some kind of redistribution of the reward of mining or whatever you want to call it, how do you ensure that the participation is equitable on a one person, one vote? Satoshi tried to do this with one CPU, one vote, and the introduction of ASICs very quickly turned that into one industrial scale $100 million Manufacturing facility, one vote, right?
Right.
For whoever can afford that.
Right.
Now, if you wanted to do that, if everybody runs a node, the problem is you can't tell the difference between a node that belongs to one person, that is an honest participant and providing resources for the system versus 1,000 nodes that belong to one person, 100,000 nodes that belong to one person that simply has the capital to deploy as many of these Sybils, sock puppets, if you want, in order to take a bigger share. So that's a very interesting problem to solve. And people have been trying to solve that problem. In fact, Satoshi Nakamoto's proof of work system is a solution to that problem, very specifically a solution to that problem. And it's not a perfect solution, but you can't fake proof of work. So it's a better solution than simply giving every IP address participation in consensus.
Right.
I think it's interesting to explore these things, and I'm not afraid of the idea that other people may have different political, economic, socioeconomic opinions than I do and may want to participate in different systems. The good news is they can't change Bitcoin because Bitcoin has a specific point of view and it's robust. They can experiment with other systems. And one of the beautiful things that's happened in this industry is everyone's experimenting. So you're going to see every political system imaginable, including many that have never been tried before, be expressed as a consensus network. This is the essence of this. This is politics as a network protocol. economics as a network protocol, social governance, voting, elections, how we manage our affairs as a network protocol, everything as a network protocol. And some will be robust and some won't and will fail. But the beauty is you can choose. And I think that's the most amazing thing that Satoshi Nakamoto did, open the door to a system where we all have a choice to voluntarily participate in a system, and then build a system that makes for a very good choice, at least for me.
Right. So here's one last question, man. I'll ask you another question because I know it's getting close to the hour. What's the future, man? Like if I were able to give you a magic wand and you hit the future, like where do you want to see Bitcoin in the future outside of people having their own keys? Like where do you want to see this go into the future?
I think the most important thing that needs to happen, well, I think there are two things that need to happen in the Bitcoin space, but also in the broader cryptocurrency space. In Bitcoin, I think the most important thing is privacy. Privacy over everything else. If we don't make Bitcoin more private and more fungible, it will not survive a concerted state-level attack that attempts to punish people for using it. So you can't stop people from using it. You can't stop them from starting to use it. And you can't confiscate their money.
Right.
But you can confiscate their family and throw them into a dungeon. You can confiscate, you can take possession of their bodies and throw them into a dungeon. And so if using this system has in real life consequences to your physical safety, then we have a problem. Anonymity is the only way we can make robust systems that allow individuals to assert their rights and their freedoms without then being punished by an authoritarian system. And so right now, there are a few authoritarian systems that are trying to punish people who get involved in Bitcoin. Most places don't, so it's all kumbaya. We have a narrow window of opportunity. This is the honeymoon period. And in this honeymoon period, we need to take this cute little gecko and turn it into a Komodo dragon of a cryptocurrency. Scaly, ugly, biting, and willing to defend itself because it will come under attack. The only reason it hasn't is because it's not systemically dangerous yet. And I strongly believe that. And if Bitcoin doesn't do it, that doesn't mean the end is here. It just means that other systems will. And that's why I'm also interested in privacy coins, because I think that's a very important factor. That's more important than scaling. It's more important than user interface design. It's more important than the next moonshot, because all of the systems that take shortcuts on privacy, on decentralization, on robustness, in order to get to mass adoption, to scaling, to whatever else, open themselves up to being turned off when the going gets tough, right? So if they become successful, then they can easily be disrupted. And that means we're not going anywhere. So that's where I think we should go with Bitcoin.
Because hold on, before you go on, let me ask you that from a privacy standpoint. If we did not buy into the we need fiat for Bitcoin, it would probably make it it's not going to be completely anonymous, but it would make it a lot more pseudonymous than it is now, because there will be no connectivity to an actual human being at that point, right? If we the fact that we continue to keep trading it for fiat in and out, and because the fiat system we have to have KYC AML, then that kind of has. Because like I said, I used to meet people that I never have seen before, get the Bitcoin, go on my way, and we would never see each other again. You know what I'm saying? And it was like, I didn't ask their name. We just made sure it was a transaction directly. I get the Bitcoin, he gets the dollars, and we keep moving. You see what I'm saying? If we didn't buy into this fiat thing, wouldn't that be a lot better if we finally got to the point where we built systems that were completely around Bitcoin? Because once you get there,
no, it wouldn't.
Join, do those kind of things. Yeah, go ahead.
It wouldn't be enough. And the reason it wouldn't be enough is because if you have privacy and anonymity today and you make transactions, but in the future, your privacy is breached, right? They got you. They got you on a bullshit charge. You're just driving in your neighborhood and they're like, your headlight is broken, sir. You're like, what? My headlight isn't broken. Now it is. Step out of the vehicle. Give me your phone. Use your finger to unlock it. You don't have an option. Great.
Right.
Who are these people you're transacting with? Now you are in trouble. And the
Right,
problem is that
yeah.
we can go back in the history and unravel everything you've ever done on this blockchain, which maybe at the time was perfectly illegal. You donated. Lamar, I see here that in 2017, you donated to BLM. Very, very progressive of you. But of course, you know, now BLM is a terrorist organization and we're sending them to Guantanamo. So unfortunately, retroactively,
Right.
you see, that's what happens in authoritarian states. Maybe it doesn't happen in the US. Let's hope it fucking doesn't. But it is happening right now in Hong Kong. It is happening right now in Russia. It is happening right now throughout China.
Right.
And so therefore, it's not good enough to simply stop the points at which identity gets affixed or attached to your addresses. You have to go back and not leave trails that become incriminating evidence for crimes you didn't even know you were committing because they weren't crimes when you were doing them. And if you don't have that level of robustness, you have a problem, which is why we need to sort this stuff out. So I still think this is the top priority for Bitcoin, and for every blockchain.
And it's funny because I started to experiment and research Grin a lot, right? I was there really early on. And a lot of people, because of its drop off in fiat, stopped looking at it as much, right? Not realizing that the technology behind it can actually help us a lot moving forward, even if we added it to something like Bitcoin. So I'm with you, man. Like, I am so anti-surveillance. It's crazy. Like, I literally just got a phone SIM card after a long time, just because it's not that I don't, like, the stuff I do is not anything illegal. It's just that I don't want people, like you said, to go back and connect me and say, well, you know, you did this with such and such. And so I think it's extremely important. But yeah, let's go on to the future.
Illegal is an issue of a moment in time and the prevailing characteristics of a society, right?
It's bull, because it was illegal to free a slave.
It was illegal to free a slave. Everything, it was absolutely illegal for George Washington to raise an army against his king. You know, all of those things were illegal. The bottom line here is that retroactively we can pretend that there's no need for a struggle, and you can say nice palliative things like, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear, and all of that bullshit. But the bottom line is that, and this is a very important part of my principles, without privacy, you have no other rights. It's as simple as that. Without privacy, you don't have speech. Without privacy, you don't have freedom of association, freedom of religion, freedom of expression, freedom of movement, freedom against search, freedom of your bodily integrity. You don't have any of those freedoms, because if they can't stop you from acting, they can punish you after the fact for acting in ways that were absolutely within your rights at the time when you acted. And if you can be stripped of your freedom, you can be stripped of every single freedom and right you have if you are stripped of your privacy. Let me give you one example so you can understand. So hopefully our audience can understand how important this is. Do you know they have elections in North Korea?
No.
Yep. So they have free elections in North Korea. You can vote. There's one small difference. Apart from the fact that they pick who can run. But there is an opponent to Kim Jong-un every time they have elections. The only difference is that when you fill in your ballot, you have to show it to the party official before you put it in the box. That's it. That's the only difference. You can vote for whoever you want. whoever you want, and watch your family disappear 30 minutes later. That's the only difference. They just take away a tiny smidgen of privacy. They take the secrecy of the vote out of it. You have to cast your ballot openly in front of the party official, and you can vote for whoever you want at penalty of death for making the wrong vote. So privacy is a foundational freedom, and without it, all of the other things wash away so quickly. And I think, you know, I come from Europe. You know, I grew up, my father grew up in a village that was occupied by the Nazis. He told me the stories of the Gestapo walking in his street and pulling people out of their homes at night. In Europe, this shit is recent, it's real, it's understood, and it's very, very top of mind for people. Americans haven't had that experience yet. And that's wonderful. I hope we never do. But one of the things that Europeans understand very, very clearly, and we've seen it again in Yugoslavia, we've seen it in Rwanda, we've seen it in a whole bunch of other places, is that in a week, everything can change. You can think you have a middle-class, open democracy of, you know, just like the Yugoslavians thought, wonderful, flourishing democracy, and then 2 weeks later, you're dealing with genocide. This shit happens fast, and there will always be some people who just go along with it. So the reason these technologies are important, and the reason privacy is important, is because it empowers individuals to resist basically capricious authoritarian power. And, you know, I hope that you live in a place where you don't need that right now. How wonderful it is to be like that. Billions of people already live in places where they desperately need that. And so if you do this, do it for the right reasons, understand how this technology works, educate others on the principles, and do it for the other 6 billion before you become one of them.
Right. And then Bitcoin future, man. We want Antonopoulos Adamus. Like give us the Andreas future of Bitcoin, man. What do you think?
I think that this technology is full of surprises. One thing that I've realized from the very early days is that I wasn't expecting and was completely blindsided by the very invention of Bitcoin. And then again, by the invention of several other technologies that became part of Bitcoin. I was blindsided by other technologies that came out of Bitcoin, like Ethereum. Never expected that. I was blindsided again by the Lightning Network, Mimblewimble, and that technology. So every time I think I've got a handle and I can say, okay, there's a straight line from A to B as to where we're going.
Right.
Someone will come along and invent something and go, nope, we're going that way. Right. And you thought you could keep this contained? It is uncontainable. People talk about Bitcoin being a black swan event, a unanticipated, irreproducible, nonlinear discontinuity with the past. Bitcoin isn't a black swan event. Bitcoin is a black swan factory. And it will continue to produce black swan events, one after the other after the other. And just when you think you understand what it is, it turns again. And now it's not just Bitcoin. There's a whole ecosystem of black swan factories. This is the internet going from a mechanism of communication replaces the post office to a mechanism that replaces TV news, entertainment, and media, newspapers, to now a mechanism that replaces politics, economics, monetary systems, governance. And I don't think there's any reason to believe it's going to stop fundamentally disrupting our reality in ways that redistribute power in radical ways.
And most people don't let go of power easily, right? This is a revolution you can fight with a few private keys. And so,
Yes, if we had asked for permission, they would have said no. Fortunately,
right.
no one asked.
Right. So yeah, Andreas, listen, thank you for coming to the Black Blockchain Summit. It's been amazing. Listen, I appreciate everything you've done for me in the past and just being, good old dude, man. Real
Well,
talk.
thank you. I was honored to be invited, and thank you so much for making this a really fun experience for me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man, we got to do this again sometime and just chat, man, because
For sure.
I love what everybody's building, and hopefully we can get back together sometime. And you just keep doing what you're doing, Doc. Like keep
Thank
spreading
you.
the gospel, keep telling folks what's going on with Bitcoin and explaining it in a way that people can actually digest it. So I appreciate you, man. So thank you.